Hello guys, this week during social studies class we are going to learn about the French and Indian War. This was a war that had two names and it was fought on two different continents. In Europe it was called the 7 Years' War because this is how long it lasted. This was one of the many wars between France and Britain. In North America, it was called the French and Indian War because here there was a third party. The American Indians took sides. They had been living on the land on dispute for a very long time. The three groups that were involved in this war had different reasons for fighting. For the French, and the British, they wanted to claim the land for their own countries, while American Indians wanted to keep their lands, the land where they had been living on for many years. The objectives during this lesson are to analyze the cause of the French and Indian War, to identify George Washington's role in the French and Indian War, to assess how the alliances during the French and Indian War affected the British colonies, and to describe the role played by American Indians in the French and Indian War and the events that followed. So remember, this took place during 7 long years. These wars started when French explorer Roberto de la Salle claimed the Ohio River Valley for France. The French built forts in the area to protect their claim from possible invaders. As you can see on this slide, I've included a picture of the Ohio River Valley. This was a huge region and it was very fertile. Some British settlers established trading posts in this area as well. The French felt that they claimed the land first, so they would not give it up. French soldiers attacked the British trading posts, destroying them. They built a fort nearby and called it Fort Duquesne. If you look at the map on this slide as well, you'll see that both British and French built forts very close to each other. Fort Duquesne was built by the French, while Fort Necessity was built by the British, and they were both located in present-day Pennsylvania. In 1753, the British sent a small army to the contested region, to the region in dispute. George Washington was a young soldier from Virginia, and he was the army's leader. Seeing that the fort was well guarded, Washington decided not to attack. Instead, his men fought and defeated a small group of French soldiers in the woods nearby. They then built their own fort and called it Fort Necessity, as I mentioned before. On this slide, you can see, you have a visual of what each of these forts looked like. There is also a sequence chart. This sequence chart is going to be worked on in class. This is in your book and you're going to complete it by listing two other key events that led to the start of the French and Indian War. Below the sequence chart, I've included three options, but you are only going to use two of them. So going back to the events that led to this war, American Indians joined the French soldiers in their attack on the fort. Working together, the large number of French and American Indians beat the smaller British force. Part of the reason for the Indians to join French instead of British forces was because the French were in some way more respectful towards the area where they lived, and they did not try to impose anything on American Indians. They didn't pretend that they spoke their same language or followed their same traditions or shared their beliefs. So this was part of the region. So the French and the Indian War had begun. Its name reflected the fact that in North America, the British Army fought both the French and their American Indian allies. An ally is a military partner. Many American Indians were persuaded to support the French because they feared that the British colonies were spreading into their territories. Like I mentioned earlier, these war lasted 7 long years, during which there were different battles, and the majority of these battles were won by the French. But as you may know from life in general, different things can happen. Your luck can turn around in a second, and this is what happened. In 1755, the British returned to the area in the hope of capturing Fort Duquesne. This time, they sent a leader with experience to try and defeat the enemy. Edward Braddock was a general who went to the area. Washington served as his advisor. However, the French and the American Indian fighters defeated the British again, killing General Braddock. So the effort to capture the fort failed. The British lost many early battles. Then, in 1757, British leaders sent reinforcements from Europe. These made the British Army stronger, and 1 year later, in 1758, they finally took control of Fort Duquesne. The Iroquois decided to join forces with the British. This new alliance was unstoppable. The French and their allies had been beaten. To end the war, France and England signed a treaty. This is a formal agreement between countries, and France agreed to surrender much of its territory in North America to the British. The British now controlled the Ohio River Valley. This upset many American Indians. They knew that more colonists from the east would arrive soon, and unlike the French, British settlers built towns and roads. They changed the landscape, and they were in some way very abusive towards the American Indians. So then, a few years later, after the war had been finally won by the British, an Ottawa leader named Pontiac took action to stop the British, and he led an army that attacked British forts and villages in the Ohio River Valley. After much fighting, the British destroyed Pontiac's men. So King George III issued an order called the Proclamation of 1763. These prohibited colonists from settling lands west of the Appalachian Mountains. The king hoped this order would help keep peace with American Indians and not cause further costs. The proclamation upset colonists who were eager to settle in the Ohio River Valley. Many of them pushed west despite King's order. After the war, American Indians continued to try to stop settlers from taking their land. One Cayuga Indian leader called Logan tried to keep peace with white settlers. However, the settlers went into the Ohio River Valley to destroy several Indian villages. After these events, Chief Logan fought to keep white settlers out of the region. He did not want to make any treaties with them anymore because he did not trust the colonists. And on this slide, you can see the map that shows us the area in dispute. So if you look at the legend, we have what belongs to the British, or what was claimed by the British, the French claim, the Spanish claim, who even though did not participate in this war, they also were a European country who claimed area in North America, and the disputed area where the American Indians lived. So Britain claimed all the area east from the Appalachian Mountains. The French claimed the area west passing the Great Lakes, and the area in between was the disputed area. And this, in the end, the British settlers claimed the area for Great Britain. So they, in the end, they won the war, and this area uh, belonged or was ruled by this country. So what's next? In our next lesson, after this one has been war and this area is now part or is a colony of Great Britain, the British, the French, and American Indians all took part of the French and Indian War, as we learned or as we will learn in this lesson. And the British felt very loyal to Great Britain. That's why they fought so hard. But soon, tensions between the colonies and Great Britain will arise. And this is exactly what we are going to talk about in our next lesson. So this is it from this lesson. We're gonna stop this video here. We're going to work a little bit more in class, learning about the causes and the effects of the French and Indian War and sequencing the events as well. So goodbye guys. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in class.